it's all wrong, it's a mess, everything is a mistake, or maybe it just really had to do with timing. Just a second. I think timing is such an important thing that's missed, like in life, yes, and in work. Let me say, especially speak specifically as a painter, as an artist, and I'll explain why. One can read many thought-led thinking, thought-provoking, motivational kind of books, which are fantastic, and it can display for you a set of rules, things that the book is encouraging you to comply with, to do things. If you want to do this, you should do that, and setting out a set of principles and rules and examples and stories that you can apply to your life. And I think a driven person, or any especially driven person, can grab that and you take it to heart and then you implement it. And I know it's so obvious to say, but I'm just going to say it because if life were that easy or simple, then things would work magically for everybody. So I will share a personal example, a few examples in relation to the value of time that I've experienced in my work and things surrounding my work. Let's say go back 6 years ago. I remember having a conversation with someone very well established in the art community, in the art world, and this individual was so helpful to me, gave me advice that was very pivotal, that till this day I share with others, and till this day I hold to heart. And it was really beautiful, valid advice. And actually I took this advice and I implemented it, and I saw results actually really quickly. And then the same individual told me something else that I thought, I think that's a bit strange. And for some reason it wasn't fitting with me. And so I decided, I was like, I'm going to be a bit confident here and not do that other thing you're suggesting. And it was in relation to actual social media, Instagram. This particular person in the art community, in the art world, was saying, use Instagram like this, do it this way, don't use it like that. And actually a few other people were saying it to me, saying, don't use it like this, do it like this. And then again, even another gallery at the time was saying, it's not that important, just ignore it. And for some reason, for me, I felt that I wanted to kind of use the platform in a particular way. There was something that I could see really clearly in my head. But I guess at that specific time, many people weren't doing what I wanted to do. Well, let me be more specific. Many artists were not doing what I wanted to do. And so it looked strange at that particular time, but for some reason it was very clear in my head. And so I was like, I'm going to do this. And so fast forward 4 years later, that individual and the same group of people had started to adopt the methods, if you will, that I was using. They were now doing it. And in fact, they were inviting me to come and give talks to, their team, or to sit down with them and go, wow, how have you done X, Y, and Z? How have you used it like this? I really am encouraged by what you've done, because the climate had changed. And also at the same time, I remember when lockdown happened, other individuals who were saying the same thing to me. Now that the climate, the environment of the world had changed, we were in a different time, they didn't have a space on, let's say, Instagram, social media. They didn't have, they hadn't built anything up, or they weren't really familiar with it. And this is people who have a huge relationship already in the art community. And so then they were asking me to come and give talks, and they felt like a kind of lifeline for them had been cut, because obviously COVID had happened and we all were living inside, the proverbial kind of four walls, that's where we were. And so timing is a very funny thing, because if we talk about what you want to see in your work, or how whatever success means to you, whether it's the success of seeing the artwork itself grow and your vision as a painter, drawer, illustrator, filmmaker, whatever, you see it in front of you change and you're happy with it. I think the success of something doesn't exist in a vacuum. I think there are other variables. Our environment, or what's happening at that time, can really affect how something is received. Another example is an art documentary I was watching where a very renowned museum was talking about a very well-known artist who at the time they gave no attention to, not because there was any hard feelings or anything, it's just because they admitted saying that they felt they were an institution that at the time they would have been unable to see just how special the work this artist was doing. And it wasn't until like 15 years later or so where, because of other variables involved, again, that has to do with timing, that their eyes had a different perspective on the work. And thinking about one's work, I remember when I was really throwing myself into painting at the very beginning, I remember drawing something and immediately kind of hating it. And someone saying, "What do you mean? That looks great." And I just, in fact, like I've even thrown work back then, like thrown work away, and then gone back to it and looked at it, and I'm like, "Oh wow, this looks great." And so what happened? Like the work's the same, but something in me changed. At one particular time, I was unable to see what was going on with it, and then later on, my perspective changed. And so I'm not some scientist or anything like that, or some all-seeing, all-known individual. What I am sharing is I'm learning that there is just, for an artist, it's good to give yourself time. And I know lots of questions arise with that, like, but how do you manage that? When is it too long? When is it not enough? I think from a practical point of view, I think let's put it in the context of making work, that when you're making work, don't be too quick to judge. Don't be too quick to say that's crap. Or even sometimes, I was joking with another artist saying, I've gone to bed and painted something and I thought it's amazing, and I wake up the next morning and I'm like, what is that? Like time has passed and I look at it again and I don't like it anymore. So I guess here's the thing, it's never going to be perfect, right? We are never going to get it right, whatever we mean by that. Let's say we're never going to hit the mark all the time in terms of getting it right. But I think a few things, what you can or one can do is, of course, just authentically be themselves in that moment. And by authentically be themselves, I mean just you can only judge what you know, but then also appreciate when you're able to that sometimes what you know at that moment might not be fully trustworthy, or let's say might not be enough. And to consider that there are many things that affect how we see things. There are many other variables, many other things to consider in relation to how you experience a piece of work. And I can keep stretching this example for ages, like with relationships with people. Even if you're like, I don't know, baking something, all the ingredients can be right, but it doesn't mean it's ready to eat yet. It's not about kind of ticking boxes, and I don't think it's about that. I don't think it's about trying to simply logically put things in place. I think actually what keeps us humble and what makes us stay fresh and what makes us stay awake is that art can have a life of its own, and in having a life of its own, it kind of decides when it's ready. And it decides, ironically, maybe who its audience is. It decides when it's time for it to be seen. I don't know. But what I am learning is that there is, on the one hand, it can be scary, because it can potentially scary, because you might think, well, how can I ever be right? And then that can instill a fear in someone of not making choices. And that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying don't make choices or don't trust your gut, you know, such as life. But I think there is space to allow space for thinking time, to allow space for something to marinate and to settle and to come back to it and consider that it may not be wrong or it may not be right, but it may just need time. And so I think it's also a combination of, look, you do what you can do, you put in the hours of work that you can put in, you study what you can study, and you act faithfully towards that, and then you let it go. And then you just allow it to do its thing. Not the other way around of, well, it's just going to do its thing anyway, and let me just leave it. That's not what I'm encouraging. What I'm saying is that it's a conversation between you and the work of, you've had your chance to say something, and now allow it to kind of speak, you know, metaphorically speaking. Like, allow it to do its thing, and just give space to time. Don't be too quick to judge yourself or others, and allow time to kind of have its place, I think. Yeah, 100%.